Okay guys, welcome back. So I bought this 120 marker set from Michael's. They had a 60% off with Joann's. They gave that to us for some clothing. So we're going to review it today. Right away, the one thing that I kind of don't like is, and not to be a Debbie Downer, is the fact that like they're just all randomly assorted in here. It's not by colors. So I am going to fix that. I'll do that on 2x speed. The crazy thing about it not being color coded is that when they give you the swatch sheet, which I'll show you here in a minute, it's by color. Like the yellows are all grouped together, the blues are all grouped together. So why isn't the bag coming in these same groupings? See here, like it starts with the yellows, and all the yellows from yellow 5, 6, and so on, they're all together. So that didn't really make sense to me. Just like any alcohol markers, you always want to make sure you're doing the swatches because the caps often don't match up with the actual swatches that you'll get. And to make sure that you're not picking colors at random, you need to have some reference point. And it's nice that Ohuhu actually gives you a page to do swatches because Copic does not. But the one thing that I noticed is the paper that they give you for these swatches makes the marker feel like it's extremely dry. That was the one thing I was noticing. I'm like, are these dry markers? Like, especially I was comparing them to other Ohuhu markers that I have and Copic. Copics tend to be like overly juicy at times when you first get them, and then, like when you're taking off the cap, they're dripping down. And that is the one thing that I kind of hate because it's hard to get out those ink marks out of your clothing. This doesn't really happen with these Ohuhu markers, but they're not as dry as I initially thought. They're not dry at all. It's just that this paper is really, feels like it's really sucking the juice out of them for whatever reason. The 120 set is the biggest set of markers that I've ever had at one time. So doing the swatches feels like an eternity for me. It almost feels like overkill with the markers, but you have a good variety, so I can't complain too much on that. Now that I'm done, I'm showing you the swatches completed. So there's two ends to this marker. That symbol indicates the chisel tip, which is good for doing landscape. It's flat, looks like that, covers a lot of surface area. And on the other end, that's the brush tip, good for fine details as well as blending. In order to test out how these Ohuhu markers work, I'm going to be drawing 2 pairs of birds today. So I have used Ohuhu markers in the past, but I was only the ones with the chisel tip as well as the fine tip. Now the chisel tip I would recommend getting, but the fine tip I don't really think you need. They're quite hard to draw, color in big things, and you cannot blend nicely with them. The one circle I have done is drawing small circles, but you're there forever in comparison to the brush tip, which allows for flicking motions to blend, as well as it just covers larger surface area since there is more to the brush tip in comparison to the little nib. The nibs are cheaper, but I think the brush tip is a better purchase. All the northern cardinals are rocking this mohawk at the top of their head, or if you want to say they're the unicorn in the bird world. So that's what I drew in there. It kind of reminds me of something you'd see in a rock band. Maybe they're really big music guys. So you'll see me hesitate here for a moment because I realize this is a darker color than I wanted. And unlike acrylic markers, you cannot go over a dark color with a lighter color. Once the dark color is down, it's down for good. You can only darken from there. Whether that's with an Ohuhu marker or a Copic. So I kind of just roll with the punches and use this as my shadow. So the one thing that I noticed, and I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can see as well, there isn't much feathering going on. And feathering is when you lay down a streak of alcohol marker, it'll spread out. And that happens a lot when you're just using like regular paper. Right here, this is just my sketchbook. I'm not using paper designed for markers, but there isn't much feathering. And I do notice that does happen a lot with Copic markers. They tend to feather quite a bit, and this Ohuhu is not feathering that much. There is some feathering going on. I've used these markers when I was drawing a face earlier, and there was some feathering, but it's not much, especially considering this is just like some $5 sketchbook that I got a couple years ago. The one thing I will say, you can definitely see the marker streaks as I'm drawing this bird. That might bother some people. To me, it's not really a big of a deal because its bird is like the feathers. That's how I see it as. I find this to be more annoying when I'm drawing like hair. I don't necessarily love seeing those streaks. I kind of like a flat color, but it can give you some depth. So it just depends on the style that you're going for. Here, I don't mind. And then so as you can see, I can open the markers and you're not seeing any like drops over it. That's the one thing that I really think Ohuhu has over Copic markers, because they tend to be just so juicy. Even when like they need to be really filled, they're still like splotting all over my page as I'm taking the caps off, and that's like quite annoying because it can ruin pages that you're drawing work so hard, especially if it's a darker color and it falls on a lighter area. There's no way to really remove that. One piece of advice for when drawing eyes is make the white of the eye bigger than you think it needs to be. And because you can always go back over it, but it's hard to just get that pure white even when you're using a gel pen. So subtract the white slowly. So I'm going to go over my initial thoughts. I think they blend quite well, but I was not used to the brush tip being quite as firm as it is, because Copic markers are kind of not flimsy, but they're more malleable than the ones here. And I will show you that later on in the video. But I still think they do a good job of blending. So they're much better than the bullet nib. I would not recommend getting the bullet version of these at all. It just doesn't make sense. Like, the discount isn't worth the frustration that you will be dealing with later on in the road. I am used to coloring with the Copic Chow, so I found that the barrel of the marker was a bit thicker, and it took a little while to get used to holding in my hand, but it's nothing that you won't get over within like a couple times drawing with it. It's definitely comfortable, and I know kids they don't have as nice fine motor skills, so it's perfect for them, really. Using a lighter color because I want to see how the lights how they look in comparison to the dark colors such as the blues and the purples. Now, I often use yellow in the Copic markers, and I do want to say, unfortunately, I think they do a better job at the yellows. Their yellows just look a little bit nicer in my opinion, but it's not bad at all. This is a nice yellow. It's just Ohuhu, I have found, are not able to get really light colors. This is a yellow, but it looks super pigmented. So if you want something super bright, this is what I would go for. But if you want a nice soft highlight, Copic does do a little bit better. Even their pastel colors, I've seen those. Their pastels just truly aren't light enough. It's just too dark. With that being said, though, I think Ohuhu definitely wins in their varieties for their purples. I think a lot of the Copic purples, there's just a lot of overlap when there should be distinct colors there, which is why a lot of people use alcohol markers in conjunction with Prismacolors. I did get some Prismacolor so that I'm able to bring more depth to my drawings, so you'll be seeing that in upcoming videos. The type of paper that you're using is important, but also making sure that using quality markers is important too, because these markers just want to blend together. As you can see, I use the two different shades of orange on the wing. It just blends nicely, and I didn't really have to work for that. I'm not using marker paper, so the paper certainly isn't helping me. It's the markers themselves. So as I'm taking a step back to look at this bird, it reminds me of something else that I've seen before, like some cartoon. I can't remember what, and I don't quite like that it is reminding me of that. So you'll see later on in the video that I am going to go over it with a black looking color. I think technically it's a gray. I try to avoid straight on black because it just dulls the painting a little bit too much. I think for me, when I'm using alcohol markers, whether that's Copic or Ohuhu, there's a certain point where you reach in your drawing where you need to just step back and pick up the line work, because there's only so much that you can really achieve, and I've reached this point for this bird, minus the blacks I'm going to go in with later. The line work tends to really pull it together, because sometimes you'll see that the colors will bleed into each other, and putting the line work creates clear boundaries on where one color ends and where one begins. It's also great for adding texture, which I find that it's quite hard to create textures with alcohol markers themselves. You can do designs, like I've certainly done wallpaper with alcohol markers, but textures are much harder to suggest. It's much easier with using a pen or other fine liner. I like my go-to for alcohol markers as well as watercolors is micron, but you have to make sure that you use it after the fact, because if you use a micron pen before it does bleed, it bleeds quite a bit and it will ruin your artwork. And this is the black that I was talking about. I think it makes it look way more realistic, almost like the ski mask. Question becomes, is this $120 set worth it? Well, clearly at $56, it's almost nearly a steal. I will say there is some yellowing that goes on with Ohuhu markers, and it happens over time. I just don't quite know why. I don't like that. I colored the mountain guy with Ohuhu, and the page directly on top of it has yellowing. This page is relatively new. I did it within a couple months, and the yellowing has begun. So it's from one of these dots. It appears over time, and I don't understand because Copics do not act like this. I wish they could figure this out because it's quite annoying. So in these next shots, I'm going to show you the difference between the brushes on the Ohuhu versus the Copic. Copic is more malleable, whereas the Ohuhu is more rigid. I'd say for the majority of people, I would recommend the Ohuhu set over the Copic. The price difference in the Copic and Ohuhu doesn't make that much sense in comparison to the results that you can get, especially when you're using the brush tip on the Ohuhu markers. Ohuhu, like Copic, can now be refilled, so there isn't a reason to just pick Copic since both markers can now last forever. And Ohuhu markers are constantly going on sale, unlike Copic, whether that's the TikTok shop, the Black Friday events through Ohuhu, or brick and mortar stores. Additionally, Ohuhu is the fact that over time, all alcohol markers fade. They won't be as vibrant as you first put them down. This isn't a permanent medium, so I would save a bit of money on something that we know is just not going to last forever. Here I'm showing you the importance of putting down that sheet in the middle to protect your pages, because all alcohol markers do bleed, and these are no different. There are two reasons that I will still continue to buy Copic markers. One, the yellowing does get on my nerves because I do like to use alcohol markers in my sketchbooks, and Copics do not yellow like Ohuhu does. They need to get on top of that. And then two, the light colors on Copic markers just are not matched by the pastels of the Ohuhu. The pastels are just way too pigmented. They can never get quite as light as Copic can. Until next time, my little droplets, I'll catch you in the next video.